Hi, this is David Allison. I'm a human values expert, a consultant to big global brands, a speaker, and an author of 2 best-selling books. And today on the show, we're going to talk about how human values will help you be an 8 times better leader than any demographic information you've ever had your hands on before this. How close to 1 million surveys can prove you're wasting 90% of your budget if you're using demographic ways of looking at people and understanding people, and how the people that you want to engage and influence the most may change their behaviors in sometimes drastic ways, but the values that drive them are going to stay exactly the same, which is why value graphics beat demographics every single time. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to our delicious conversation with David Allison. He is the author of this book, which is The Death of Demographics. He's putting forward that demographics is done. We need to have a funeral for it. It's over. It doesn't make sense anymore. There's these categories that we like to shove people into, i.e., these people are boomers. They believe this. They value that. The Gen Xers or millennials or whoever it might be, these are all categories that don't address who we actually are. And he talks a lot in this book about these 56 values and these 15 archetypes and how we fall into those. And it's a way for us to unify and come together and a way for us to understand people much better. It's a fascinating conversation. If for some reason you didn't get to hear part 1, you're only coming in at part 2, I honestly recommend that you go back to part 1 and understand why this is so vastly important. In fact, let's dive in right there. Let's talk about the science of this, David. Let's talk about the science of values and why are they so important to understand? Because the argument of the demographics people is, they believe they have a science. So talk to us about your science around values.
Yeah. I'm going to just answer one other question before we go there, if that's okay. Yeah. I don't think we've talked about this, and many people, I find this is like the second thing that people, they go, oh, it's values things make sense, but what about this? The second question that often comes up is, I still need demographics. I still need to understand them. And so, absolutely, I don't want to make it sound like we can do away with them entirely. What we have to kill off is the way we've been using them, because demographics are still necessary. I frequently will reach for my reading glasses at this moment. I mean, demographically, these are not selling to 17-year-olds because it's just a fact of life. They don't need them yet, the lucky things. And those of us who do need them, we need them. So demographically, it's still important to understand these folks. But the problem is we've been saying, now we know who we're selling to demographically and we understand who they are. You don't. You just understand what they are. And that's
let's pause that because I want everybody to get that. So demographics are good at showing us what people are, but not who they are.
Yeah.
Value graphics is about who they are, not what they are. So,
and
we have 50 plus, we need glasses or likely to need glasses. That's what we need, but it's not who we are.
Yeah. And then there's another category of psychographics, which is how many pairs of reading glasses does this guy own? How often does he buy a new pair? How does he break them a lot? Is that why he's buying so many? And how does he feel about having to wear them in the first place? And how much does he spend on each? But all that other stuff, anything that's not demographics is psychographics. All the other information we know. And it too has a limitation. We can see patterns in there and go, cool, this guy buys a lot of reading glasses, whatever. But it doesn't help us understand how to get this person to do something next.
Right.
And that's what we're all in the business of, isn't it? We want to get somebody or some group of people to do something next. Not what they did before.
Well, as you pointed out in the book, demographics has been a way to show what people have done. It's a past thing, right? The demographic psychographics just shows what people have done in the past, and the value graphics are what most people are likely to do moving forward, not necessarily because they did it in the past, but because of who they are, not what.
You think about Amazon, you buy buy a pair of shoes on Amazon, and then for the next 3 weeks, what do you get? Ads for shoes. Like, I bought the shoes. Like, why are you showing me more? I don't need any more of those.
Right.
So that's where psychographics fall down. They have a place. Those patterns are interesting to see. You can learn things from them, but they're historical, right? And what we're all looking for is the future. We want to understand how to predict what can happen next. And that's where value graphics come in. So if you ask me to talk about the science, I'll keep it short and sweet. If you look at all the different fields of behavioral science, of which there are many, psychology, psychiatry, neurology, sociology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they've all been studying for a very long time, how do people make decisions? And they all fight like cats and dogs about it. They all have a different, distinct way of coming at this, but they agree around one core principle. And that core principle is that our values, our core values, are a kind of filtering mechanism that we use to figure out how to do everything all day long. We don't even know we're doing it. There's a piece inside your brain called the insula, which sits inside the prefrontal cortex. And the insula's job is to filter through stuff. Standing in the store, 2 cans of soup, which one am I going to buy? You pick one without even thinking about it. But your insula's thought about it. Your insula said, this one's aligned with my values and this one isn't. And that's why I'm throwing that one in the grocery cart. So why do we need to understand people's values and their value graphics? Because it's how people decide what to do next. And that's what we're all trying to figure out.
Right. So let's put this, let's come back to something we talked about in the beginning. If you ask somebody their values, they will lie.
Yeah.
People are not going to say I value greed, although they may, right? So when you talk about values and values-based decisions, it's important for us to grasp that these values are driving us. And do you believe, David, in your research, that values are evolving, or do you believe that they are fixed and permanent? So is this person's values going to be the same at 15 as they are at 45? Or are they going to be different at 65? Or, yeah. Do you believe that they're evolving, or are they the same?
To answer that question, we need to just do a little bit of a definition of terms. The word values gets thrown around a lot. People mean different things by it. So when we're talking about values, we're talking about the core human values that you use to make every decision in your life. It's not optional. It's not, I'm going to use this value sometimes and not other times. These are the root, your DNA. This is who you are as a human.
Mm-hmm.
Those values are formed in your late childhood, early adolescence. Sociologists call that period of time socialization. Mm-hmm. And it depends on who's important in that moment in your life. It might be a teacher, a parent, someone else's parent. Who knows? Somebody's values imprint on you. Mm-hmm. And once they're imprinted, once you have them, they don't change. You don't get to, I like to say, we're not an octopus. You don't get to chop one off and grow another one later on. You have your values. They never change. How they play in your life might change a little bit. One value that you have out of your set might become a little bit more important or a little less important based on what's going on in your life. Suddenly you're a father. Family's always been important, but now family's a little bit more important than it was before. But you don't decide to be a father and have a family unless family is an important value to you. So it wouldn't be part of your decision-making set unless it was already a value that you had. So people will sometimes argue with me and say, yeah, but I don't care about the things I used to care about and I don't behave the same way. Of course you don't. But the way you're moving through your life is going to always be rooted in those values. Your behaviors will change. Your emotions will change. Your preferences will change. Your likes and dislikes, all that psychographic stuff will change nonstop based on what's going on around you and where you are and what you're doing. But the values that you're using to determine those things, they're stealing this from De Beers. The values, like diamonds, they're forever. They're just going to stay there. So once you know the values of a group of people that you're interested in, engaging and influencing and inspiring, the data doesn't stale date. It's good forever. Demographics change. You wake up tomorrow, I'm not 18 to 24, I'm 25 to 36, or I suddenly got a raise, I'm making twice as much money. Psychographics change, how I like things, prefer things, what I spend on things, that all changes all the time. But values are solid and stable. And so I think really useful, no matter what it is you're trying to do.
So let's push back a little bit. So let's take somebody who's gone through massive transformation. So this gentleman I know, Daryl, he is a black jazz musician, and he is the only person who has been given Grandmaster robes from the KKK. So he has actually changed people who were Grandmasters in the KKK and who have transformed themselves and are no longer part of that movement by meeting him and having conversations with him. Tony McAleer, who is a friend of mine, was a neo-Nazi. He was the head of war, white Aryan race here in British Columbia, went to the Supreme Court twice to make BC and Alberta into white provinces, is now the author of The Cure for Hate, is the leader of the foundation, The Cure for Hate, and speaks around the world at Holocaust museums and such, and has spent time at Auschwitz, and they made a documentary about it. Those two people, or two examples, seem like people who've had a massive shift in values.
They've had a massive shift in behaviors and beliefs, but the values that have driven those behaviors and beliefs have stayed the same. I don't know either of them, so maybe and particularly since they're such incendiary topics, I think maybe I'll move away and give you a different example. But sure, let's talk about COVID, because it's something we can all relate to. Mm-hmm. We all went into COVID and lockdown and restriction and not allowed to see people. And based on our values, we would have changed our behaviors radically. Some people for whom a super important value is family, they're the ones who are on a Zoom call with their mom and their sisters and their cousins and their aunts and making sure every day that everybody had their PPP and were wearing their gloves and doing all the things they're supposed to do. But if family wasn't an important value for you, you didn't start doing that all of a sudden. You just, maybe ambition was an important value and you were doubling down on your boss. You're like wanted to make sure you knew how you were still working really, really hard. And you want that promotion that we talked about before I had to start working from home. And then after COVID, after the lockdown and the restrictions, we'll come out the other side and your behaviors will change again. You're not Zooming with your sisters and your cousins and your aunts anymore. You still have family as a value, but your behavior around that value will be radically different. And same for the guy who was all about ambition. He's the one who's lining up. I want to go back to the office. I want my boss to see me. I don't want to work from home anymore. So monumental things can happen in our lives, including being cut off from everybody we consider to be part of our daily routine. You have to be by yourself for 2 years. That's a pretty monumental thing. And your behaviors will change, your emotions, your preferences, your likes, your dislikes, but it's all coming from the same set of values that don't change throughout that whole series of events. So I would say that your friends you're talking about have some set of values that drove them in one direction, and they behaved in a certain way. And then something happened where they were made aware of other information, or they met someone who moved them so deeply that they saw another perspective on life. And based on their values, they were receptive to that and said, wow, I have been behaving in the wrong way. I'm changing my behavior. But the root cause...
From your point of view, just making sure I understand. So from your point of view, they were always behaving in integrity with their values.
Yes.
But their behavior was justified by their values.
Yes.
Until they were enlightened or awakened, or whatever the term might be, that there's a better way to behave, better in quotations, better way to behave in alignment with their value.
Yes. Now let's try and be a little more specific. Let's say, and again, I don't know these folks, but let's say someone like you've described, one of the reasons that they could have been involved in that in the movements that we've talked about might have been the value of social standing. I get to be the guy who's respected within this group of people that I am part of, and I've risen in the ranks, and everyone knows I'm the big guy. That may be what kept them there. Then this transformational moment happened. They met someone, they learned something, they saw something different, and they went, wow, that's less important to me than the value I have around family. And understanding how my behavior has been damaging for families and for my family, that's outweighing the value of social standing now that I have this new context, now that I have this new information.
Question, which is, okay, so the values are not changing, is the order changing?
Yeah. The order of the values.
One value of X, but 10 years down the road, X is now in 4th place.
Yes.
Whereas the one that was in 6th place is now at number 1.
Yeah.
So there's a shifting of priority of values.
Absolutely.
Values themselves don't change.
I talk about it as the passports in the sock drawer. We all know someone who has 3 or 4 passports, 3 or 4 different nationalities. And depending, like right now, you're living in Canada, you've got a nice life set up for yourself. It could, and that's the passport you're living on, but your other passports are still in the sock drawer. And at some point, situation may change and you find yourself moving to the UK or moving to some other country where you have a passport. That one comes out of the sock drawer. The Canadian passport goes back in the sock drawer. You don't lose it. It's still in your sock drawer, but you're now living on this one. So yes, the importance of your values can move around. The fact that those are your values, that's not changing.
Right. So that's an important, that's what I thought was really important that people should need to understand, is that your values don't change, but the priorities do, depending on what's going on in your life at any given time.
Exactly.
Because if your value is a certain thing in January of 2022 and you live in the Ukraine, that value system is going to change by the end of February 2022, living in the Ukraine, because now Russia's invaded.
Yeah.
And so the list of priorities are going to shift, but the values are not. It's just where they are.
Now,
hierarchy.
Someone's going to be listening to this and go, yeah, but so there are some times when values can change, but they're very rare and they're very, very hard to even define. There's lots of arguments about these moments where that can happen in the sociological world. And it's everything you've said, everything we've been talking about so far applies in 99.9% of the cases. But just for the one person who's listening who's going to go, yeah, but how about, yes, there are very rare circumstances under which your values can change. But they're very rare. They're unicorns.
So I think there's a really important distinction. So in part 4 of the book, you give this, what you call your do-it-yourself toolkit for profiling groups. Talk to us about that part of the book, because I think that's an important part for people to make this real. I mean, you can read the book and you honestly, you will find it fascinating and you'll find it insightful about yourself. But the book was originally designed for marketers, although I really want to emphasize that as a leader, this is a very important book for you to understand, read, and to put into practice. So let's talk a little bit about this toolkit.
Yeah. So as we've already discussed in part 1 today, this has become a calling for me. My goal is to get people all over the world to change the way they look at each other. So for me to write a book and go, there's a better way for people to look at each other, and then not tell you how to do it, would be kind of negligent on my part and not in keeping with my values. So we've included part 4, which is a do-it-yourself toolkit. There's a quiz in there. It's 15 questions long. Send it out to whoever you want to understand. with this caveat, it's designed as a sociological quiz. It's not meant for one person. It's not a psychological profiling tool. It's to understand groups of people. So use your CRM system and send it out to all your customers, all your sales team, whatever. And then you want to take all their responses, use the answer key, and you'll find is it'll point you to one of 15 chapters in the book about the 15 archetypes that we see in the data set. The archetypes are the largest cohorts in this global collection of data, this global inventory of values. And to say that the whole world fits into 15 archetypes is pretty inaccurate. In fact, there's hundreds of thousands of potential profiles, and that's when we work with a client, that's what we find out is which one of those is the right one. But 15 big, giant clumps of data kind of pretty much cover most people to some level of accuracy. It's not precise, but you know what? It's better than what you're doing now, which is not using values at all.
Right.
I like to say it's like playing the piano with your fists, you know? It's not really pretty, but at least you're using the right instrument. At least you're using the right tool.
So let's go to the archetypes because I found that fascinating. So I'm back at the same question, which is, we talked before about do values change? And what you've talked about is no, but the priority might shift. Or generally the answer is no, or mostly the answer is no, but the priority might shift. What about archetypes? Do you find that they change with age, with levels of success in life, levels of trauma, whatever it might be?
No. The way to think about archetypes, let's go back to the Halloween candy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you took all the Halloween candy on the dining room table, instead of putting it into 56 piles, you just went, all of that stuff is chocolate, and then there's everything else. You'd have two big piles. Is it accurate to say that a certain person fits into this pile and another person fits into that? Yeah. Is it precise? No. But you know that they don't fit in the other one. So an archetype is giving you a non-precise way that's better than what demographics and psychographics alone can provide to start to think about people based on their values. So for example, one of the archetypes is all about, it's people around the world for whom a primary value is loyalty.
Yes.
So we call them the loyalists. There's a whole bunch of loyalists in the world. It's one of 15 massive groups that exist out there. Now, all the different kinds of loyalty that there aren't represented in there. There's hundreds of different kinds. And no one's ever as simple. A group is never so simple that they're only going to be in one archetype. In a more precise profile, we'll find that the people who are going to buy those reading glasses, some of them are loyalists and some of them are from the experience group and some of them might be from the family group. And each one of them has a certain kind of, and so you just get into much more finite layers of nuance. But it's still accurate to say that the majority of the people that you send the survey to fit into this giant cluster. And then in that chapter in the book, we give you all the details we have about that giant cluster. So the disclaimer, the caution, is if you're going to use that, and I hope you do, if you're going to use that, just be aware that you're using a really imprecise tool. Don't go betting the farm on what you find out. Use it as a way to kind of, test which way the wind's blowing and say, oh, they're kind of this sort of person. Got it. It's going to help you. It's going to help you start to be values driven in the way you make decisions as a leader, marketer, whoever you are.
Yeah. I mean, like when I was reading through those, one of the things about the archetypes is that I could, first of all, I want to have everybody understand, you may have in your head traditional archetypes, that are Jungian. This is not those.
No.
Right. So if you're thinking, well, I understand archetypes, it's different. So, I'm a Jungian by training. It's not that. It's different, even though there's a word seeker in there, etc. But, using that term, actually, when I read it through it, I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I was absolutely a seeker. Am I still a seeker? Yes, absolutely, because I'm, this is my religion. curiosity, right? So I'm definitely a seeker. But does it have the priority in my life that it had in my 20s? Absolutely not. So again, has my archetype changed, or has the list of where I prioritize it changed? So
So if you look at that chapter on the seekers, there's a list in there of what are the values for this group of people. If you take a look at that list, I think what you'll find is that while you may not fit that dominant archetype description anymore, that those values are pretty darn accurate for you. And that, yeah, flip them around a little bit, toss them in a slightly different way, and that's still who you are. We wouldn't maybe call the group of people who have the values aligned in that way seekers anymore. We'd call them something else, but it's still that same set that's going to more or less, again, remember how inaccurate this is. It's just a which way is the wind blowing kind of thing. It's still going to more or less represent who you are today.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to understand that. Like I said, I definitely could see myself in quite a few of the different archetypes, elements of, rather than saying I'm definitely one of these, and that's exactly what I don't know that anybody would fall in. Am I reading?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because humans are more complex than saying, you're going to fit into this category and nothing more. And that's why this is a sociological data set. We need to talk to a whole lot of people. And on average, we can say this group of people primarily fits into this category. So what we're looking for is the similarities between a lot of people that we can then call an audience or a group or a target audience or whatever. One person takes this and they'll have the same results that you did. They'll go, yeah, I'm kind of this and I'm a little bit of that. I'm a little bit of this. Of course you are. But if I talk to 1,000 people, I can say for that 1,000 people, 75% of them fit in here. And then you get to see the similarities you can start to use when you're trying to figure out how to talk to them or persuade them or inspire them.
Beautiful. David, I've loved this conversation. I thank you for taking the time to be with us. I know you're a busy lad and you're on call around the world and you're speaking all over the world about this and making a massive difference. I want to make sure that people know where they can find out more about you. But before we do that, I want to ask you, what do you want said at your eulogy? What do you want them to say about you?
Yeah, every podcast host has a really kicker final question, and that's a good one.
Thank you.
I really do believe that the world will be a much better place if we stop using old-fashioned, outdated, inaccurate ways of thinking about each other, relating to each other, and instead start to understand what really matters to people on the inside. And it's not going to change in my lifetime. It's going to be whoever picks up this mantle and runs with it next. But I hope that at my eulogy, that someone can stand up and say that I made that process begin, that I was able to get people to begin this journey. That it's going to take us a long time, but eventually get to a place where we live in a values-driven world. It'll be a better world for all of us.
Beautiful. Thank you, sir. Please tell everybody where they can find out more about you, the book, and all your wonderful resources that you're available. And if people want to find you as a speaker too.
Yeah. So finding me as a speaker, davidallisoninc.com. I'm really not shy online. So if you even just type my name into Google, you're going to find me. The research company is valuegraphics.com. I live on LinkedIn. That's another place to connect. And the book is called The Death of Demographics, and it's on Amazon. Oh, and one last thing. If you go to valuegraphics.com, you can sign up for our, I call it semi-monthly newsletter, because it's kind of depends on how fast I manage to get it out the door. And you can also register and download a couple of different documents. One that I think your listeners might be interested in, and it's a global report on values in 9 regions around the world.
Beautiful.
register for that, you get the report, and then that automatically signs you up for we call it the Human Values Handbook. We send it out roughly every month, and we just try and put more tools and tips and stuff in there that you can use as you start trying to become more and more values oriented and values driven in your life and in your work.
And I know that you are moving this all forward in the availability of apps and software and things that people can be able to tap into as they move forward. So it's important for you to sign up and get to be part of the newsletters and part of the monthlies, because there's more things happening than just what's going on right now.
Yeah, the stuff in the back room always.
Always, yeah. So please make sure you do that. David, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. And for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning for the tribe also control the movement of that tribe. Business and political leaders committed to positively shaping the landscape know that they must tap into what drives human behavior, exactly what we've been talking about. And I'm Dov Barron. I show businesses, teams, and leaders how to harness their emotional source code to move the tribe, because unified actualized meaning is the one monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and for companies. I want to thank you for joining us on the show today. Remember, you can find out about my brand new course called Creating a Culture of Belonging. You can find that. We'll put it in the show notes. How to link to that is courseifyx.com/belonging. So next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you are looking at people through demographic lenses, and how limited that is, and how much bigger and more embracing it is to look at people through value graphics, to look at people based on how they value life, what it is they value in life, and the archetypes they're running to hold that together. I'm Dov Barron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.